My daughter-in-law snapped in the hospital. "Leave him here. We're not taking on this burden." I was left completely alone on Thanksgiving. But my grandson, a Marine, walked in, made one single phone call, and by Tuesday morning, 94 panicked missed calls flooded my phone. What he said, and why they suddenly lost their minds, the explosive truth is coming next. Before continuing, subscribe to our new channel, where we tell stories about men who take revenge on their insolent children, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law. My name is Walter Harrison. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. Spent 38 years as a commercial real estate appraiser before I retired 6 years ago. I always believed that family meant something, that blood runs thicker than water, that you take care of your own. Funny how life has a way of teaching you that some lessons come too late. The house on Pinewood Drive has been my home for 43 years. My wife and I raised our son Brandon here. We planted the oak tree in the front yard when he was 5. We built the deck out back where we used to have Sunday barbecues. Every corner of this place holds a memory. For the last 12 years, those memories were all I had to keep me company while I watched my wife slip away, piece by piece, into the fog of Alzheimer's. Brandon is 42 now, works as a sales manager at a car dealership. He wasn't always the man he is today. I remember when he was 7, racing his bicycle down this very street, stopping only to show me the scraped knee he'd gotten trying to jump the curb. I remember his high school graduation, the way his eyes shone with possibility. I remember thinking, that's my boy. That's my legacy. His wife Kimberly came into the picture 8 years ago. Real estate agent, always put together, always smiling that professional smile that never quite reaches her eyes. At first I thought she was good for Brandon. She seemed ambitious, driven. She pushed him to want more, to reach higher. I didn't realize at the time that more would eventually include everything I owned. The change didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like watching paint peel from a wall. The visits became shorter, the phone calls less frequent. Brandon would show up for holidays, but there was always this edge of impatience in his voice when I talked about his mother's condition. Kimberly stopped coming altogether after the 2nd year, said the disease made her uncomfortable. I remember thinking, uncomfortable for you? Try watching the woman you love forget your name. The excuses piled up like unpaid bills. Too busy with work. The kids have activities. Traffic is terrible on this side of town. Meanwhile, I was handling everything alone. The medications, the doctor appointments, the nights when she wandered, and I had to search the neighborhood in my bathrobe at 3 in the morning. But I managed. You do what you have to do for the people you love. Or at least, that's what I thought everyone did. 3 months ago, everything changed. I was down in my basement working on my ham radio station. It's my hobby, has been for years. I've got an extra class license, call sign W5WGH. Most nights, I'd go down there after putting my wife to bed, just to talk to operators around the world. It was my escape, my way of staying connected to something beyond these 4 walls. That particular night, I was adjusting my Yaesu FTDX10, scanning frequencies when I picked up something unexpected. Cordless phone signals sometimes bleed over into ham radio frequencies. It's a known phenomenon, especially with older phone systems. And there it was, clear as day, my son's voice. "Mom's not going to last much longer," Brandon was saying. The doctor said maybe a few months, tops. I should have changed the frequency, should have respected their privacy, but something in his tone made me freeze. "So we need to be ready," Kimberly's voice responded. "The house is worth at least $680,000. I already have a buyer lined up. Cash offer, 30-day close." "What about Dad?" "What about him? He's old. He can't maintain that big house by himself. We'll put him in one of those senior living places. He'll probably be happier there anyway, around people his own age." I sat there in the basement, headphones pressed against my ears, listening to my son and daughter-in-law calmly discuss dividing up my life like it was a business transaction. "You really think he'll go for it?" Brandon asked. Kimberly laughed. Not a nice laugh. "Honey, look at him. He's exhausted. He's been taking care of your mom for 12 years. He'll be relieved when someone else takes charge. Trust me, he won't fight us on this." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my workshop, staring at the radio equipment, replaying their words over and over in my mind. Part of me wanted to storm upstairs, call Brandon right then and there, demand an explanation, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the appraiser in me, trained to observe, to analyze, to wait for all the information before making a move. Or maybe it was something darker. Maybe it was the realization that if I confronted them now, they'd just adjust their strategy. They'd become more careful, more subtle. And in the end, I'd still lose everything. So I decided to wait, to watch, to prepare. My wife passed away on a humid August morning. She went peacefully in her sleep, which was a mercy. The funeral was 3 days later at Weed Corley Fish on North Lamar. It was a small service, just family and a few old friends who still remembered her from before the disease. I stood by her casket, accepting condolences from people I barely recognized. Brandon was there with Kimberly, playing the role of the grieving son. He hugged me, told me he was sorry, said all the right things. I nodded and thanked him, my face a careful mask. After the service, we gathered at my house for the reception. Neighbors brought casseroles. Old friends shared memories. Everyone moved through my home with that particular careful sadness that follows a funeral. I played my part, the bereaved widower, grateful for the support, exhausted by grief. Brandon found me in the kitchen, away from the main crowd. He put his hand on my shoulder. For a moment, just a moment, I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe that phone conversation had been taken out of context. Maybe, "Dad, we need to talk about your situation." My situation, not our loss, not Mom, my situation. "Not now, Brandon," I said quietly. "I know this is hard, but we need to think practically." He glanced toward the living room where Kimberly was chatting with some relatives. "You can't stay here alone. This house is too big, too much maintenance. Kimberly and I have been looking into some really nice senior living communities." "Brandon," my voice was flat, "your mother's been gone for 3 days. Which is exactly why we need to act now before you get overwhelmed." He had that earnest expression on his face, the one he probably used when selling someone a car they couldn't afford. "We're trying to help you, Dad." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my boy's face. Before I could respond, he walked back into the living room. I followed, still carrying the coffee cup someone had handed me earlier. The room gradually quieted as people sensed something was happening. Brandon cleared his throat, standing in the center of my living room like he owned it, which I suppose he thought he soon would. "Everyone, I just want to thank you all for coming today and supporting our family." His voice carried that practiced sincerity. "This has been an incredibly difficult time, but we're focused on making sure Dad is taken care of." He looked directly at me. "That's why we've made the decision that Dad will be moving into a senior living facility. We're going to sell this house. It's the best decision for everyone involved." The room went silent. I saw the shock on faces around me. Neighbors who'd known me for decades. Friends who'd watched Brandon grow up. Someone's coffee cup clinked against a saucer, too loud in the quiet. Kimberly stepped up beside Brandon, her hand on his arm, that professional smile firmly in place. "We've already found a wonderful community with full medical support and activities. Dad won't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore." Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my reaction, waiting to see what the old man would do. I set down my coffee cup on the mantel. I looked at my son, at the woman standing beside him, at the house full of people who suddenly seemed very far away, and I said nothing. I just stood there, meeting Brandon's eyes with a gaze I'd perfected over decades of negotiations. Cold, calm, completely unreadable. Let him think I was too grief-stricken to respond. Let him think he'd won. Because 3 months ago, sitting in my basement listening to their plans, I'd learned something valuable. The best revenge isn't hot, it's ice cold, and it takes patience. Brandon shifted uncomfortably under my stare. The room remained silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Someone coughed. Someone else made an excuse to leave. I turned and walked out of my own living room, leaving my son standing there, probably telling himself that my silence meant acceptance. He had no idea what was really coming. The house was finally empty. The last sympathetic neighbor had left, taking her tuna casserole with her. Brandon and Kimberly had gone too, probably thinking their announcement had gone exactly as planned. I could almost see them in their car, congratulating themselves on handling the old man so smoothly. I stood in my kitchen, looking out at the backyard where the deck was falling into shadow. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Beautiful, really. My wife would have loved this light. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where Brandon had done his homework 30 years ago, where we'd played countless games of checkers, where I'd taught him that sometimes the quiet pieces are the most powerful ones on the board. Apparently, he'd forgotten that lesson. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Gerald Martinez, real estate attorney. I'd worked with him on several commercial property appraisals over the years. Professional, sharp, not prone to unnecessary questions. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Walter, I heard about your wife. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate that." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I need to schedule a consultation. It's about estate planning, specifically setting up a trust." There was a brief silence on the other end. Gerald was smart enough to hear what I wasn't saying. "Of course. How about tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock at my office?" "That works." After we hung up, I sat there for a while, thinking about the timeline. Based on what I'd heard in that phone conversation 3 months ago, Kimberly had already found a buyer. Brandon would probably want to move fast, strike while I was still supposedly disoriented by grief. I had maybe a month, possibly less, before they started pushing harder. 1 month to build a fortress they couldn't breach. My mind drifted back to that night in the basement, 3 months earlier. I'd sat there in the dim light of my radio equipment, the headphones still on, long after Brandon and Kimberly had hung up their call. I'd felt something shift inside me, not anger exactly, more like clarity. I remembered another night, 20 years ago. Brandon had been in college, struggling with a business law class. He'd come home for the weekend, frustrated and ready to drop the course. "I don't get it, Dad," he'd said, throwing his textbook on this very table. "All these contracts and clauses and legal loopholes. It's like they're designed to confuse people." I'd picked up the book, flipped through it, found a chapter on property trusts. "That's exactly right," I told him. "The law is complicated because it protects complicated things. The people who understand it, who take the time to learn it, they're the ones with the real power." He'd rolled his eyes. "You sound like my professor." "Your professor's right." I'd tapped the textbook. "Knowledge isn't just power, Brandon. It's protection. You remember that." I wondered if he remembered that conversation now. Probably not. He'd dropped the class anyway, switched to something easier. But I'd remembered. And in the 3 months since overhearing their plans, I'd done my homework. The next morning, I drove downtown to Gerald's office on Congress Avenue. 12 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Gerald met me in the lobby, shook my hand, ushered me into a conference room. "So," he said, settling into his chair, "you mentioned a trust." "An irrevocable living trust," I specified. "I want to transfer my house, the property at 2847 Pinewood Drive, into a family trust. I need it done quickly, and I need it done in a way that's absolutely bulletproof." Gerald didn't blink. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" "My son informed me yesterday at his mother's funeral reception that he's selling my house and putting me in a care facility." I kept my voice neutral, factual. He seemed very confident that I wouldn't object. "I see." Gerald pulled out a legal pad. "And you do object." Strenuously. "Irrevocable trusts are exactly what they sound like, Walter. Once you transfer the property, you can't take it back. The trustee, whoever you designate, will have legal control. You understand that?" "I understand perfectly. That's exactly what I want." "Who did you have in mind as trustee?" I'd thought about this carefully. My granddaughter, Sophia. Brandon's daughter. She's 19, first-year law student at UT. Gerald raised an eyebrow. "Does she know about this?" "Not yet. But she's the only one who visited during the last 12 years. The only one who actually gave a damn." He wrote something on his pad. "There's a living trust amendment process we can use. The document takes effect immediately upon execution, but the information doesn't become public record until it's registered with Travis County Clerk's office. If timing is crucial, we could delay that registration." "How long can we delay it?" Legally, as long as we want, provided the trust document itself is properly executed and notarized. The registration is just for public record purposes. I felt the pieces clicking into place. So if I execute the trust tomorrow, but don't register it for a month, your son could spend that entire month making plans based on the assumption that you still own the property outright. Then when he tries to execute those plans, Gerald allowed himself a small smile. He discovers the house isn't yours to sell anymore, because it belongs to the trust. Exactly. And only the trustee, your granddaughter, can make decisions about the property. I leaned back in my chair. How quickly can you draw up the paperwork? I can have it ready by the end of the week. You'll need to see a notary. I can recommend someone discreet. Lisa Coleman, excellent reputation, completely professional. Set it up. Gerald studied me for a moment. Walter, I have to ask. Are you prepared for the fallout? Your son isn't going to take this well. Gerald, my son stood in my living room yesterday in front of all my friends and neighbors and announced he was selling my house without asking me first. He did that at his mother's funeral. I met his eyes. I'm not just prepared for the fallout. I'm counting on it. The next few days moved with surprising speed. I met with Lisa Coleman, a no-nonsense notary, who asked only the questions that mattered and kept her opinions to herself. The trust documents were thick, dense with legal language, but Gerald walked me through every clause. The key thing, he explained, is that this was executed while you're clearly of sound mind, with proper legal counsel and with legitimate estate planning purposes. Even if Brandon tries to challenge it in court, and he probably will, he'll have a very hard time proving duress or incompetence. What about the timing? 3 months after my wife's death? Actually works in your favor. Shows you took time to grieve, then made rational decisions about your future. It's not like you did this the day after the funeral. But I had started planning the day after I overheard that phone call. Brandon and Kimberly just didn't know it. I signed the documents. Lisa notarized them with her official seal. Gerald filed the originals in his office safe. We agreed to hold off on the county registration for now. One more thing, I said as I was leaving. I'll need you to prepare another document, a full accounting of any loans or debts my son may have taken out using my property as collateral. Gerald's expression didn't change, but I saw the understanding in his eyes. That's going to require some research. Private investigators, credit checks. It won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs. I want to know every penny he owes and who he owes it to. Consider it done. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite satisfaction, it was too early for that, but anticipation. The kind of feeling you get when you've made the first move in a chess game and you're already 3 moves ahead of your opponent. That evening, my granddaughter Sophia called. She did that sometimes, usually late at night, when she was taking a break from studying. Hi, Grandpa. How are you holding up? Her voice was so much like her grandmother's it made my chest ache. I'm managing, sweetheart. How's school? Crazy busy. First year's no joke. She paused. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer after the funeral. I had an exam the next day. You stayed as long as you could. That's more than most people did. Another pause. Grandpa, is it true what Dad said? About you moving into assisted living? I looked around my kitchen, the house that Brandon wanted to sell out from under me. What do you think, Sophia? I think, she hesitated, I think you're the sharpest person I know, and I think if you wanted to move, you'd make that decision yourself. Smart girl. I'd always known she was special. Sophia, I want you to remember something. Sometimes the biggest power you have isn't in your voice or your actions. It's in documents, in understanding the law, in being patient enough to let your opponents make mistakes. That sounds like something my property law professor would say. Your professor sounds like a smart person. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Study hard, sweetheart. You never know when that knowledge might come in handy. After we hung up, I went down to my basement. The radio equipment hummed softly as I turned it on. I scanned through frequencies, listening to operators chatting from across the country, across the world. Voices in the static, each one a reminder that there was a whole world beyond this house, beyond this city, beyond my son's betrayal. Somewhere out there, Brandon and Kimberly were probably having drinks, celebrating their future windfall, making plans for what they'd do with $680,000. Maybe Kimberly was already calculating her $20,000 commission. Maybe Brandon was browsing luxury car websites, planning what he'd buy once his old man was safely tucked away in some facility where he could be forgotten. Let them plan. Let them dream. Let them get comfortable with the idea that they'd won. Because in 30 days, when Kimberly tried to sell a house that legally didn't belong to me anymore, when Brandon discovered that his inheritance had just vanished into a trust controlled by his own daughter, that's when they'd understand. Brandon always underestimated the old man, always thought I was too tired, too grief-stricken, too simple to see through his schemes. Time to change that assumption. I adjusted my radio to a clear frequency and sent out a call. CQ, 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 this is W5WGH, Whiskey 5, Whiskey Golf Hotel, calling CQ and standing by. A response crackled through, an operator from Montana, asking about conditions. We talked about signal strength and atmospheric conditions, the way operators do. Normal conversation, simple technical details. But I felt different, sharper, more focused than I'd been in years. The old man wasn't defeated. The old man was dangerous, and he was just getting started. A week passed, 7 days of watching Brandon and Kimberly circle my house like vultures who'd spotted something dying in the desert sun. The first showing happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. Through the window, I saw Kimberly's Mercedes pull up, followed by a silver Lexus. She'd brought potential buyers. I opened the door with the carefully practiced expression I'd been perfecting. Tired, confused, just a little bit lost. The grieving widower who didn't quite know what was happening anymore. "Dad!" Kimberly's voice was bright, cheerful, like we were old friends. "These are the Johnsons. They're very interested in the property. I told them you wouldn't mind if we took a quick look around." The Johnsons, a couple in their 40s, dressed in that carefully casual way that screamed money, smiled at me with the kind of pity you reserve for abandoned pets. "Of course," I said, my voice soft and a bit shaky. "Come in." I watched them move through my house, watched Kimberly point out the hardwood floors, the updated kitchen, the charming vintage details. Watched her casually mention that the property would be available very soon and that they were looking at a motivated seller situation. The Johnsons nodded, made notes on their phones, asked questions about the roof and the foundation. I shuffled to the living room and sat in my armchair, the one I'd sat in for 40 years, playing the role of the confused old man who didn't understand what was happening to his life. But inside, I was cataloging everything. The way Kimberly touched the walls like she already owned them. The way she spoke about updating the outdated decor, meaning every memory my wife and I had built into this place. The way she never once looked at me directly, as if I were already furniture to be removed. After they left, I sat there for a moment. Then I pulled out my phone and sent Gerald a text. They showed the house today, moving faster than expected. His response came immediately. "Documents ready tomorrow. Stay the course." "Stay the course." "Right." That evening Brandon called, not to ask how I was doing, not to check if I needed anything, to discuss logistics. "Dad, we need to talk about the timeline. Kimberly's got several interested buyers, and we don't want to lose momentum." "Momentum," I repeated. "Right. So we're thinking you should start looking at facilities this week. I can drive you if you want. There's a really nice place in Round Rock. Round Rock is 30 minutes from here." "Exactly. You'd be close enough that we could visit regularly." The lie was so smooth I almost admired it. Brandon hadn't visited regularly in 12 years, but sure, put me in Round Rock, and suddenly he'd become a devoted son. "I'll think about it," I said. "Dad, we need to move on this. The market's hot right now, and—" I said I'll think about it. Silence. Brandon wasn't used to me pushing back, even gently. "Okay," he finally said, his tone careful. "Just don't take too long. We're trying to help you here." After he hung up, I went down to the basement. The trust documents were locked in a file cabinet next to my radio equipment. I didn't need to look at them. I'd memorized every word, but I liked knowing they were there. My insurance policy, my trap, set and ready. The next day, I met with Lisa Coleman again. She had me sign the final amendments, her notary seal making everything official. The house at 2847 Pinewood Drive no longer belonged to Walter Harrison. It belonged to the Harrison Family Irrevocable Trust, with Sophia Harrison, my 19-year-old granddaughter, who didn't even know she was a trustee yet, as the legal decision-maker. "You understand what this means?" Lisa asked, her pen hovering over the signature page. "It means my son can't sell what isn't mine to sell." She nodded, stamped the document with that satisfying thunk of official finality. "When do you want to register it with the county?" "Not yet. I need them to dig themselves in deeper first." Lisa didn't ask questions. That's what I liked about her. She just filed the documents, gave me copies, and sent me on my way. 2 days later, I watched from my living room window as Kimberly brought another couple to see the house. This time she didn't even ring the doorbell first. She had a key, Brandon's key, the one I'd given him years ago for emergencies. She let herself in like she owned the place. I was sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee when she walked in with her clients. "Oh!" She actually looked startled to see me. "Dad, I didn't realize you'd be home." "I live here," I said mildly. Of course, of course." She recovered quickly, that professional smile snapping into place. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Chen. They're looking for something in this neighborhood. I was just showing them the layout." The Chens looked uncomfortable, like they'd just realized they were touring someone's actual home, while that someone sat there watching them. I stood up slowly, using the table for support, playing the part. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you," Mrs. Chen said quickly. "We're so sorry to intrude." "It's no intrusion," Kimberly said smoothly. "Dad understands this is part of the process. Don't you, Dad?" I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the calculation behind those perfectly made-up eyes, the way she was already mentally spending her commission, the way she'd probably already picked out the new car she'd buy with the money. "Of course," I said softly. "I understand completely." After they left, I called Gerald. "They're getting aggressive," I told him. "She's bringing people through without even telling me first." "Perfect. The more confident they get, the harder they'll fall." I heard papers shuffling on his end. "I've got the research you wanted. Your son's debt situation is extensive." "Tell me." "He took out a loan 3 months ago, $50,000 from a private lender, using the expected inheritance as collateral. That's on top of the $25,000 he borrowed for the earnest money deposit on the sale contract. Plus, there's another $30,000 in credit card debt, mostly from the last 6 months. I did the math. $105,000. And that's just what I could find with a basic search. There might be more." Gerald paused. "Walter, your son has been borrowing against your house for months. He's been planning this?" I already knew that. I'd known since that night in the basement when I'd overheard their phone conversation. But hearing the numbers, the specifics, it crystallized something inside me. This wasn't just greed. It was calculated, premeditated. They'd been circling me like sharks while I was caring for my dying wife, waiting for the moment they could strike. "Keep digging," I told Gerald. "I want every detail, every loan, every lender, every dollar." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure they understand exactly what they've done." The following week, Brandon showed up at my door with brochures, glossy photos of smiling seniors playing shuffleboard, eating in cafeterias that looked suspiciously like hospital dining rooms, participating in engaging activities, led by staff members with those aggressively cheerful expressions. "Look at this one," he said, spreading the brochures across my kitchen table. "They've got a full medical staff, 24-hour care, activities every day. You'd love it there, Dad." I looked at the brochures. "These are expensive. Don't worry about that. Once we sell the house, there'll be plenty to cover it." "And what happens to the rest of the money?" Brandon blinked. It was the first direct question I'd asked about the finances, and I could see him recalibrating, trying to figure out if I was getting suspicious or just curious. "Well, we'd set it aside for your care. Make sure you're taken care of for the rest of your life. In an account you control. Dad, we're family. Of course I'd manage it for you. You shouldn't have to worry about these things." I nodded slowly, like I was considering it, like I was actually buying this performance. "When would this happen?" I asked. "Soon. We've got a buyer ready to close. Just need you to sign some papers, and we can move forward." "What papers?" "Nothing complicated. Just transfer documents, power of attorney, the usual stuff. He said it so casually, like he was asking me to sign for a package delivery. Power of attorney. The words hung in the air between us. If I signed that, Brandon would have legal control over everything. My house, my accounts, my decisions. I'd be signing away my autonomy, my independence, my life. And he thought I was confused enough, grief-stricken enough, broken enough to do it. I'll need to think about it, I said. Dad? I said, I'll think about it, Brandon. His jaw tightened. I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Frustration, maybe anger, before he smoothed it over with that practiced concern. Okay, but we're running out of time. The buyers won't wait forever. After he left, I stood at the kitchen window, watching his car disappear down Pinewood Drive. The oak tree we'd planted when he was 5 swayed in the breeze, its branches reaching toward a sky that seemed impossibly blue. I pulled out my phone and checked the calendar. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral, 3 weeks since Brandon's announcement, 3 weeks since I'd signed the trust documents. 7 more days, I'd told myself. 7 more days to let them feel secure, to let them commit fully to their plan, to let them dig themselves so deep they'd never climb out. 7 more days until I registered the trust with Travis County Clerk's office. 7 more days until everything changed. I went down to the basement and turned on my radio, found a clear frequency and made contact with an operator in California. We talked about atmospheric conditions, about signal propagation, about the technical details that made this hobby so satisfying. But my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about Brandon's face when he'd laid out those brochures, the practiced concern, the false warmth, the absolute certainty that I was too weak, too old, too broken to stop him. He'd forgotten something important, something I'd tried to teach him years ago, back when he was young enough to listen. The quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous, and I'd been very, very quiet. The weekend brought something unexpected. Sophia showed up at my door. Grandpa! She threw her arms around me, and for a moment I just held my granddaughter, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the warmth of someone who actually cared whether I lived or died. What are you doing here, sweetheart? I had a break between classes and, I don't know, I just wanted to see you. She pulled back, studying my face. Are you okay? Really okay? We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Brandon had spread out those brochures 2 days ago, and I made us coffee. Sophia told me about her classes, about a paper she was writing on property law, about the friends she'd made at UT Normal Conversation, the kind I hadn't had in weeks. Dad called me, she said eventually, her voice careful. He told me about the senior living facility. Did he? Grandpa, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You know that, right? I looked at my granddaughter, 19 years old, first-year law student, the only person in my family who'd bothered to show up during the hardest 12 years of my life. The only one who'd sit with her grandmother, read to her, hold her hand, even when she didn't know who Sophia was anymore. Sophia, I said quietly, if I asked you a legal question, would you give me an honest answer? Of course. If someone creates an irrevocable trust and names a trustee without telling them first, is that legal? She blinked, surprised by the question. Yeah. The trustee doesn't have to know at the time of creation. They can be informed later. Why? Just curious, learning new things in my old age. She smiled at that, but there was something thoughtful in her expression. You know, we're studying trusts right now in my estate planning class. They're actually really powerful legal tools. Once something's in an irrevocable trust, it's protected from creditors, from lawsuits, from all kinds of claims, even from family members, especially from family members. That's kind of the point, to make sure the assets are protected and distributed according to the trust terms, not according to whoever yells the loudest. I filed that information away, even though I already knew it, but it was good to hear it confirmed by someone I trusted. After Sophia left, I allowed myself a small smile. She was sharp, sharper than her father had ever been. She'd make a good lawyer someday, and in about a week, she'd make an excellent trustee. Monday morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Harrison, this is David Martinez with First Capital Lending. I'm calling regarding your property at 2847 Pinewood Drive. I sat down. What about it? Well, sir, we have a loan application from a Brandon Harrison listing this property as collateral. We just need to verify that you're aware of this arrangement and approve the lien. I'm not aware of any such arrangement. Silence on the other end. I see. Could you hold for one moment, please? While I waited, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Brandon was trying to take out another loan, using my house, without telling me. Martinez came back on the line. Mr. Harrison, I apologize for the confusion. It seems there may have been some miscommunication. We'll need to table this application until we can sort out the ownership documentation. You do that. After I hung up, I sat there for a long moment. Then I called Gerald. They're getting desperate, I told him. Brandon just tried to take out another loan against the house. Without your knowledge. The lender called to verify. I shut it down. Gerald let out a low whistle. He's in deeper than I thought. Walter, your son has to know he's running out of time. The buyers must be pressuring him to close. Good. Let them pressure him. Let him feel what it's like when the walls start closing in. When do you want to register the trust? I looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall. Circled in red was the date I'd chosen weeks ago. This Friday. I want it on public record before the weekend. That'll give them just enough time to discover it before they try to close the sale. Gerald sounded almost impressed. Nasty timing. That's the idea. Wednesday afternoon, Kimberly brought the buyers back. The Johnsons, the couple from the first showing. This time she'd called ahead, probably because Brandon had warned her I was starting to ask questions. We're doing a final walkthrough before we commit to the contract, Mrs. Johnson explained, smiling apologetically. We just want to make sure everything is as we remember. I nodded, playing the agreeable old man. Take your time. I watched them measure windows, check cabinet hinges, examine the foundation from the crawlspace access. They were serious buyers. They had money. They wanted my house. And in 48 hours, they were going to discover that the house they thought they were buying wasn't available for sale. After they left, Kimberly lingered at the door. They're ready to close, Dad. This is really happening. Isn't that exciting? Exciting, I repeated. Brandon will bring the papers by tomorrow. Power of attorney, transfer documents, everything we need to make this smooth and easy for you. She touched my arm, her hand warm and completely false. You're making the right choice. You'll be so much happier in a community with people your own age. I looked at her hand on my arm, thought about the commission she was already spending in her mind, the new car, the vacation, maybe the down payment on a bigger house. Kimberly, I said quietly, do you remember when you married Brandon? She blinked, surprised. Of course. You stood in front of everyone we knew and promised to love him for better or for worse, to be part of this family. I remember. I welcomed you into my home, into my life. I thought. I paused, let my voice shake just a little. I thought you cared about us. For just a second, just a flash, I saw something in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or shame. But it passed quickly, replaced by that professional mask she wore so well. I do care, Dad. That's why we're doing this. We want what's best for you. After she left, I went down to the basement, pulled out the file with all of Gerald's research, spread it across my workbench next to the radio equipment. Brandon Harrison. Total documented debt. $105,000. Loans taken 3 from 2 different lenders, all leveraged against property he didn't own, all based on an inheritance he assumed he'd receive. I picked up the phone and called Gerald one more time. I want you to do something for me, I said. Contact every lender Brandon's borrowed from. Tell them the property they're using as collateral is no longer available. That's going to cause some serious problems for your son. That's exactly what I want. Thursday morning, Brandon arrived with a folder full of documents. He spread them across the kitchen table. Power of attorney forms, transfer deeds, liability waivers, everything carefully prepared, professionally formatted, ready for my signature. This is it, Dad. Once you sign these, we can move forward. Get you settled in your new place. Get the house sold. Get everything handled properly. I picked up the power of attorney form, read it carefully, even though I knew exactly what it said. It would give Brandon complete control over my finances, my property, my medical decisions, everything. This seems like a lot of power to give one person, I observed. It's standard stuff. Just makes it easier for me to help you manage things. And the house would be sold to the Johnsons? That's the plan. They're offering $680,000. Cash sale, 30-day close. What about Sophia? Does she get anything? Brandon's expression flickered. We'll make sure she's taken care of. Maybe set aside some money for her college. Maybe. The word hung there like smoke. I need to think about this, I said. Dad, we've been over this. The buyers are ready to close. If we don't move now... I said I need to think about it. This time, Brandon's mask slipped. I saw the anger underneath, the frustration, the barely controlled rage of someone who thought they had everything lined up perfectly and couldn't understand why the old man wouldn't just cooperate. Fine, he said tightly, but I need an answer by tomorrow. The buyers won't wait any longer than that. Tomorrow, I agreed. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by his carefully prepared documents, all those signatures lines, waiting for my pen, all those dotted lines, ready to sign away my life. I gathered up the papers, every single one of them, and put them in a drawer. Then I picked up my phone and sent Gerald a text. Register the trust tomorrow morning. First thing. His response. Already scheduled. 8 a.m., Travis County Clerk's Office. Friday morning came bright and clear. While I ate breakfast, somewhere across town, Gerald Martinez was walking into the county clerk's office with the Harrison family irrevocable trust documents. While I poured my second cup of coffee, a clerk was stamping them with an official seal, entering them into the public record, making them real and binding and irreversible. While Brandon was probably waking up, planning his day, anticipating my surrender, the trap was springing shut. I went down to the basement and turned on my radio, scanned through frequencies until I found someone to talk to, a fellow operator in Oregon discussing antenna configurations, normal conversation, easy technical talk. But my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the phone call I'd get later today, about the moment when Kimberly would request the title documents for the closing, about the moment when she'd discover that the house at 2847 Pinewood Drive no longer belonged to Walter Harrison, about the moment when Brandon would realize what his old, tired, grief-stricken father had done. I adjusted the frequency, fine-tuning the signal, listening to the operator from Oregon talk about wave propagation and signal clarity, and I waited, because the best part about setting a perfect trap, the moment when it closes, and that moment was coming very, very soon. The call came at 2:30 that afternoon. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang. Kimberly's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a sip of coffee, settling into my chair. Let her wait. Hello? Dad. Her voice was tight, strained. The professional warmth had vanished like morning fog. I need you to send me the title deed for the house. The closing is scheduled for next week, and the title company needs to verify ownership. Of course, I said pleasantly. Let me get that for you. I walked to my filing cabinet, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the document I'd prepared weeks ago, a clean copy of the title deed, showing exactly what I wanted her to see. I took my time scanning it, sending it to her email. There you go, I said. Just sent it. Thanks. A pause. I'll review it and get back to you if there are any... I heard it, the exact moment she opened the file, the sharp intake of breath, the silence that stretched too long. Dad, her voice had changed completely. What is this? The title deed, like you asked. It says the property is held in a trust, the Harrison Family Irrevocable Trust. She was reading it out loud like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Trustee, Sophia Harrison. That's correct. How did you... She stopped, started again. Dad, this has to be a mistake. You can't just put the house in a trust without telling us. Actually, I did. 3 weeks ago. The silence on the other end was beautiful. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to figure out if this was real, if she'd misunderstood, if there was some way to fix it. Brandon needs to know about this, she finally said, her voice shaking. Then you should probably tell him. She hung up without another word. I set my phone down and waited. It took less than 5 minutes. Brandon's car screeched into my driveway so fast I heard the tires squeal from inside the house. The front door slammed open. He didn't even knock. And there he was, his face red, veins bulging in his neck, waving a printed copy of the title deed like it was a weapon. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. I stood up slowly from my kitchen chair. "Please don't shout in my house, Brandon." "Your house? Your house?" He laughed, but it was ugly, hysterical. "According to this, it's not your house anymore. It belongs to some trust with Sophia as the trustee." "That's correct. When did you do this? When did you—" He stopped, realization dawning across his face. "You've been planning this. This whole time, you've been planning this." "Yes." The single word seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. "You can't do this," he finally said. "You can't just— We have buyers, Dad. The Johnsons are ready to close. We have a contract." "You have a contract to sell property you don't own." "You own it." "No, Brandon, I don't. The trust owns it, and only the trustee can make decisions about selling it." I let that sink in for a moment. That would be Sophia. His face went from red to white in about 3 seconds. "Sophia doesn't know anything about real estate. She's 19. She's also a first-year law student. Smart girl. Takes after her grandmother." Brandon's hands were shaking, actually trembling. "Dad, you need to fix this. Right now. Cancel the trust. Transfer the house back, whatever you have to do." "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "It's an irrevocable trust, Brandon. Do you know what irrevocable means?" He stared at me. "You're joking." "I'm not." "Then we'll sue. We'll take this to court. You're not mentally competent to make these kinds of decisions. You're grieving. You're confused." "I created the trust 3 months ago," I interrupted. "Long before your mother died. I had full legal counsel, medical evaluations, notarized documents. I was and am completely competent." The color drained from his face entirely now. He looked like he might be sick. "The earnest money," he whispered. "We put down $25,000. If we can't close, the buyers will keep it. That's standard in Texas real estate contracts when the seller can't deliver clear title." He stumbled backward, catching himself on the doorframe. "No, no, 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 this can't be happening." I watched him with the same clinical detachment I used to use when appraising properties, noting every detail. The way his breath came in short, sharp gasps. The way his eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an escape route. The way his carefully constructed world was collapsing around him in real time. "We'll go to Sophia," he said suddenly. "She's my daughter. She'll sell the house if I ask her to." "Will she?" "Of course she will. She's family." "Funny," I said quietly. I thought I was family too. Brandon opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time in years, my son had absolutely nothing to say. Kimberly arrived 10 minutes later. She came through the door like a woman possessed, her perfect makeup smudged, her hair disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. "There has to be a way around this," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "Trusts can be challenged. We can prove undue influence, diminished capacity." "Good luck with that," I said. Gerald Martinez drew up the documents. "He's one of the best real estate attorneys in Austin?" Her eyes widened. "Gerald Martinez? The Gerald Martinez? You know him?" "Every real estate agent in this city knows him. He's—" She trailed off, the implications hitting her. If Gerald Martinez had created the trust, it was bulletproof. Every clause would be ironclad. Every loophole closed. She turned to Brandon. "The commission, I already spent the commission." "You what?" "I had credit card debt. I thought the sale was guaranteed. I paid off $40,000 in debt with a bridge loan against the commission." They stared at each other, and I watched the cracks in their marriage spread like ice breaking on a frozen lake. "This is your fault," Kimberly hissed. "You said he'd just go along with it. You said he was too tired, too broken to fight back. He was. He is." Brandon whirled back to me. "Dad, please, I'm your son. You have to help me." "Help you?" I let the words hang in the air. "The way you helped me for the last 12 years. The way you visited while your mother was dying. The way you were planning to warehouse me in some facility while you sold my home. We were trying to help." "Don't." My voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't insult me with that lie. Not now. Not after everything." Brandon's face crumpled. For just a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The one who'd come running to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting that Dad could fix anything. But that boy was long gone. "I'll fight this," he said, but his voice was hollow. "I'll take you to court. I'll prove you weren't competent to create the trust. Then you'll lose, and you'll waste what little money you have left on legal fees." I walked to the door, opened it. "I think you should both leave now." They didn't move at first, just stood there in my kitchen looking lost and desperate and small. "The house on Pinewood Drive is my home," I said quietly. "It was my wife's home. It will be Sophia's inheritance. What it will never be is your cash cow." I met Brandon's eyes. "You made your choice when you started planning this 3 months ago, when you took out loans against my property, when you decided I was too weak to stop you." "Dad, get out of my house." They left. Brandon looked back once, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Kimberly didn't look back at all. She was already calculating, already trying to figure out how to salvage her commission, her reputation, her life. I closed the door behind them and stood in the sudden quiet of my house. The house that was no longer mine, legally speaking. The house that was now protected in a trust, safe from their greed, safe from their plans. My phone rang. "Gerald, I heard from the lenders," he said. "They're not happy. Brandon's got loans totaling over $100,000, all collateralized against property he can't access. What happens now? They'll demand immediate repayment. When he can't pay, and he can't, not on a car salesman's salary, they'll probably force him into bankruptcy." I should have felt triumph, victory, something. Instead, I just felt tired. "There's more," Gerald continued. "The Johnsons' attorney called. They're not just keeping the earnest money. They're considering a lawsuit for fraud, claiming Brandon knowingly entered into a contract for property he couldn't sell. Can they win? Probably not, but it'll cost Brandon money to defend himself, money he doesn't have." After we hung up, I went down to the basement, turned on my radio, found a frequency and sent out a call into the darkness. An operator from New Mexico responded. We talked about nothing important: signal strength, weather patterns, the mundane details of our shared hobby. But my mind was on Brandon, on the look in his eyes when he realized what I'd done. The moment when his certainty shattered like glass. I'd won. The house was safe. My plan had worked perfectly. So why did it feel like I'd lost something too? 3 days passed before Brandon tried again. This time, he brought reinforcements. A lawyer, not Gerald's caliber, but aggressive-looking with that particular energy of someone who charges by the hour and isn't afraid to run up the bill. "Mr. Harrison," the lawyer said, settling into my living room like he owned it, "my name is Richard Sterling. I represent your son Brandon in this matter. We're here to discuss the trust situation." "There's nothing to discuss." "On the contrary." Sterling pulled out a thick folder. "We have documentation that suggests the trust was created under duress. Your wife had just passed away. You were emotionally vulnerable. It's entirely possible you were coerced." "By whom?" I asked mildly. "Gerald Martinez, who I hired. Lisa Coleman, the notary who asked me 3 separate times if I was sure. Myself." Sterling's jaw tightened. "We're prepared to file a lawsuit challenging the trust's validity. We have medical experts ready to testify about grief-induced impaired judgment." "Do it." Brandon jerked like I'd slapped him. "Dad, you don't mean that." "I absolutely mean it. Take me to court, Brandon. Let's have all of this examined in public. Your loans against my property, the way you planned to sell my house before your mother was even in the ground, the senior living facility you picked out without asking me. All of it. Public record." Sterling and Brandon exchanged a glance. "Litigation is expensive," Sterling said carefully. "Perhaps we could reach a settlement. You could amend the trust to include Brandon as a co-trustee with Sophia." "No." "Mr. Harrison, get out of my house." They left. Sterling looked annoyed but unsurprised. Brandon looked devastated. But I knew this wasn't over. Brandon was desperate now, and desperate people do foolish things. I was right. 2 days later, I got a call from Sophia. "Grandpa, Dad just called me. He says you made me the trustee of some family trust? With your house in it?" My heart sank. "Yes, sweetheart, I did." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to. The timing never seemed right." Silence on the other end. Then, Dad says he needs me to sell the house. He says it's for your own good, that you can't maintain it by yourself, that you need professional care. Here it was, the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading. Sophia, I said carefully, do you remember visiting your grandmother during the last year when she barely knew who anyone was anymore? Of course I remember. Do you remember who else was there? A long pause. You were there, Grandpa. You were always there. And your father? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. He visited 3 times in 12 years, I said quietly. 3 times. And now he wants you to help him sell the house that I've lived in for 43 years. The house where I took care of your grandmother. The house that's meant to be your inheritance someday. He says he's in financial trouble. He is, because he took out over $100,000 in loans against property that wasn't his, because he assumed he could manipulate an old man into giving up everything. I heard her breathing, steady and thoughtful. Smart girl. Always had been. What do you want me to do, Grandpa? I want you to make your own decision. You're the trustee. Legally, it's your choice, but I want you to know all the facts before you decide. Tell me everything. So I did. The overheard phone conversation, the funeral announcement, the loans, the careful preparation, all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. I'll tell Dad no, she finally said. The house stays in the trust. He's your father, Sophia. That decision might cost you your relationship with him. He made his choices, Grandpa. I'm making mine. After we hung up, I sat there feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not quite peace, but close. A week later, Gerald called with news. I heard through the grapevine that Brandon's attorney dropped him as a client. Couldn't pay the bills. What about the lawsuit? Dead in the water. Can't sue without a lawyer, and no other attorney will take the case. It's too obviously unwinnable. And the loans? The lenders are circling. He's got maybe a month before they force him into bankruptcy. I thanked Gerald and hung up. Thought about calling Brandon, decided against it. That evening I went to visit an old friend, another ham radio operator I'd been chatting with for years but never met in person. We'd arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Harold was 72, retired mechanical engineer, extra-class license holder. We talked shop for an hour, antennas, propagation, the joy of pulling clear signals out of the static. You seem different, he said eventually. Lighter, somehow. I thought about that. I've been dealing with some family issues. They're resolving themselves. Good family or bad family. Started as good, became bad. Now, I shrugged. Now I'm hoping it might become good again. Eventually? Maybe. That night, I prepared for something I'd been planning for weeks. The second memorial service for my wife. 1 month after the funeral, which was traditional in some families. A chance for people to gather again, share memories, find closure. I'd sent invitations to everyone who'd attended the funeral, plus a few additions. Brandon's co-workers, Kimberly's colleagues from the real estate agency, some old family friends. Brandon didn't know about it yet. That was intentional. The service was scheduled for the following Saturday at my house. Not a funeral home this time. My home. The place where my wife had lived, where we'd raised Brandon, where we'd built 43 years of memories. I spent the week preparing, cleaning, arranging, setting the stage for what I knew would be the final confrontation. Friday evening, I called Brandon. There's a memorial service for your mother tomorrow, I said. 2 p.m. at the house. Dad, I don't think... Everyone will be there. Your co-workers. Kimberly's boss from the real estate agency. All our old friends. It would look very strange if you didn't attend. Silence. I could practically hear him calculating the social cost of not showing up, the questions people would ask. I'll be there, he finally said. Good. And Brandon? Gerald Martinez will be there too. He has some documents for you. What documents? You'll see tomorrow. I hung up before he could respond. Saturday arrived clear and cold. I set up chairs in the living room, put out photos of my wife, arranged flowers, made it look like a genuine memorial service. Because it was. Just not only that. People started arriving at 1:30. Neighbors, old friends, colleagues from my years as an appraiser. They shared stories about my wife, hugged me, told me how sorry they were. Brandon and Kimberly arrived at 1:50, looking like they were walking to their own execution. At exactly 2 p.m., when everyone was settled, I stood up. The room quieted. I looked around at all these faces, people who'd known my wife, known our family, watched Brandon grow up, people who remembered when we were happy. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "My wife would have been touched to see so many friends here." I paused. "I want to talk about family today, about what it means, about obligations and betrayals." Brandon's face went pale. "Some of you know that my son announced at the funeral that he was selling this house and putting me in a care facility. He did this without asking me, without considering what I might want." Uncomfortable glances around the room, people shifting in their seats. "What you don't know is that Brandon had been planning this for months, taking out loans against this property, counting on an inheritance he assumed he'd receive." "Dad, don't—" Brandon started to stand. "Sit down," I said quietly. He sat. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, the stranger who'd tried to take everything from me. "I want you to understand something, Brandon. All of you." I addressed the room. "I don't believe in letting people destroy you just because they're family. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to take advantage of you, again and again." Gerald Martinez stood up from his seat in the back, walked forward, handed me a manila envelope. I took it, feeling its weight. Inside was everything: the full accounting of Brandon's debts, the timeline of his loans, the names of every lender, every scheme. I looked at my son, and I said 4 words. "Read the documents carefully." I handed him the envelope. Brandon's hand shook as he opened it, pulled out the papers, started reading. I watched his face change, watched the color drain from his skin like someone had pulled a plug. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the arm of the chair to steady himself, half sitting, half collapsing. "What?" he croaked. "What is this?" "That," I said calmly, "is a complete audit of your debts. Every loan you took out using my house as collateral, along with letters to each lender informing them that the collateral is no longer available. And notice that Sophia, as trustee, has the legal right to pursue action against you for attempted fraudulent conveyance of trust property." Kimberly grabbed the papers from his shaking hands. "Read them." Her face went white as chalk. "You notified our lenders?" she whispered. "Of course. They had a right to know the property they were lending against wasn't actually available." "They'll call the loans," Brandon said, his voice barely audible. "They'll demand immediate payment." "Yes, I can't pay them." "I know. This will destroy me." I looked at my son, at this man who'd tried to steal my home, my autonomy, my life, and felt something crack open inside me. Not quite pity, not quite forgiveness. Something in between. "No, Brandon," I said softly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it." The room was completely silent. Every eye on Brandon as he sat there, the documents scattered around his feet, his carefully constructed world demolished in front of everyone he knew. Kimberly stood up. "I need to leave." "Kimberly," Brandon reached for her. She pulled away. "Don't touch me. I can't be part of this anymore." She walked out, didn't look back. Brandon sat there, surrounded by the ruins of his plans, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw my son cry. Not tears of grief, tears of defeat. And I felt nothing but cold, crystalline satisfaction. The memorial service ended in near silence. People filed out of my house without the usual small talk, without the comforting platitudes. They'd witnessed something that made them uncomfortable, a family destroying itself in real time. I stood at the door accepting their awkward goodbyes, watching them avoid looking at Brandon, who still sat in that chair like someone had unplugged him from the wall. After the last guest left, only 4 of us remained. Me, Brandon, Gerald, and Sophia, who'd arrived late and witnessed the final confrontation from the back of the room. "Grandpa?" Sophia's voice was small. "What just happened?" I looked at my granddaughter, 19 years old, law student, the person I'd made trustee without her knowledge or consent. She deserved to know everything. "Your father tried to steal my house," I said simply. "I stopped him. Brandon's head jerked up. I was trying to help. Stop. The single word cut through the air like a knife. Just stop, Brandon. No more lies. Not in front of your daughter. Gerald cleared his throat. I should go? Walter, call me if you need anything. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Sophia sat down across from Brandon, studying him like he was a stranger. Dad, is it true? Everything Grandpa said? Brandon's mouth opened and closed. His face was blotchy from crying, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. It's complicated, he finally managed. It's really not, I said. You took out over $200,000 in loans using my house as collateral. You planned to sell my home and put me in a facility. You did all of this while I was taking care of your dying mother. Nothing complicated about it. I have debts, Brandon's voice cracked. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. You're right, I don't understand. Because when I had pressure, 12 years of watching my wife forget who I was, 12 years of sleepless nights and constant care, I didn't try to steal from my family to make it easier. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Dad, how could you? Don't you start too, Brandon snapped. You don't know what it's like to what? To have responsibilities? To make sacrifices? She stood up, her hands shaking. Grandpa sacrificed everything for Grandma, and you couldn't even visit. Brandon flinched like she'd hit him. I'm sorry, Sophia said, but she was looking at me, not him. Grandpa, I'm so sorry you had to go through all this. After she left, it was just Brandon and me in my living room. The house felt too quiet, too empty. You've destroyed me, Brandon said finally. His voice was hollow. You know that, right? The lenders are going to call the loans. I can't pay them. I'll lose everything. Yes. That's all you have to say? Just, yes? I sat down in my armchair, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. What do you want me to say, Brandon? That I'm sorry? That I forgive you? That I'll bail you out? You're my father, and you're my son, but that didn't stop you from planning to take everything from me. He started to cry again, ugly, desperate sobs that shook his whole body. Part of me wanted to comfort him, the same part that had bandaged his scraped knees, that had taught him to ride a bike, that had been so proud at his high school graduation. But that part was buried under 12 years of abandonment and 3 months of betrayal. I need you to leave now, I said quietly. Brandon looked up, his face a mess of tears and snot. Dad, please, we can fix this, we can... Leave. He stood on shaky legs, gathered the scattered papers from the floor and walked to the door. He turned back once, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something. I waited, but no words came. He just left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. I sat there in the silence of my house, listening to the familiar creaks and settling sounds. 43 years I'd lived here. 43 years of memories, good and bad. My phone buzzed, a text from Gerald. Johnson buyers officially withdrew. Contract terminated. Earnest money forfeited to them per Texas law. Brandon's loss, $25,000. I set the phone down and went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table where I'd eaten thousands of meals, where Brandon had done his homework, where my wife and I had planned our future. The coffee tasted bitter. The next morning I woke to 14 missed calls, all from Brandon. I listened to the voicemails on speaker while I made breakfast. Dad, the lenders are calling. They want their money back. You have to help me. Dad, please pick up. Kimberly's lawyer called. She's filing for divorce. She's going to take everything. Dad, I know you're angry, but this is too much. I'm your son. You can't just abandon me. The last message was different, quieter, defeated. I talked to Sophia. She won't help me sell the house. She says I made my choice. Dad, I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. I deleted the messages and called Sophia instead. Hi, Grandpa. She sounded tired. Dad's been calling me all night. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I'm not in the middle. I've chosen a side. A pause. He really did it, didn't he? Everything you said? Yes. How do you do it? How do you stay so calm when you must be so angry? I thought about that. I'm not calm, sweetheart. I'm just focused. Anger would cloud my judgment, make me do something I'd regret. This way, everything I do is deliberate, intentional, like putting the house in a trust with me as trustee. Exactly like that. Why me, Grandpa? Really? Because you were there. For 12 years, you were the only one who came to visit, who sat with your grandmother, who didn't pretend we didn't exist. Family isn't just blood, Sophia. It's who shows up when things are hard. I heard her sniffling on the other end. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for being worthy of that trust. That afternoon, I got an email from Kimberly's real estate agency. She'd been placed on administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. Seems someone, I wondered who, had filed a complaint about her showing and attempting to sell a property without proper authority. That evening, Gerald called with more news. The Johnsons' attorney reached out. They're not suing for fraud, but they're keeping the earnest money. Brandon's out $25,000. What about the other lenders? First Capital Lending sent a formal demand letter. They want their $50,000 back within 30 days, or they'll pursue legal action. The credit card companies are starting to circle too. I did the math in my head. Brandon owed over $200,000 with no way to pay it. The house he'd planned to sell was locked in a trust he couldn't touch. His wife was filing for divorce. I'd built this trap carefully, methodically, over 3 months, and now Brandon was caught in it completely, with no way out. There's one more thing, Gerald said. Kimberly filed the divorce papers this morning. She's claiming fraud in the inducement. Says Brandon lied about his financial situation when they got married. Can she win that? Probably not, but it'll cost Brandon money to fight it. Money he doesn't have. Gerald paused. Walter, your son is looking at bankruptcy. Complete financial collapse. Is that really what you want? I looked around my kitchen, at the table where Brandon used to sit, at the doorframe where we'd marked his height every birthday, at the window where I'd watched him play in the backyard. I want him to understand that actions have consequences, I said finally, that you can't treat people like disposable assets and expect them to just accept it. 3 days later, I was at the grocery store when I saw them, Brandon and Kimberly in the parking lot, screaming at each other next to his Tesla. People were staring. Someone was probably filming. You said the house was guaranteed, Kimberly's voice carried across the lot. You said your father would never fight back. How was I supposed to know he'd... You're supposed to know your own father? But you don't, do you? Because you never bothered to visit him. This is your fault, too. You pushed me to move faster, to borrow more money. Don't you dare blame this on me. I'm not the one who tried to steal from his dying mother's husband. I stood there, frozen, watching my son's life implode in a grocery store parking lot. Part of me wanted to walk over, to intervene, to somehow make it stop. But I didn't. I got in my car and drove home. That night, Sophia called. Dad showed up at my apartment, she said. He was crying, begging me to sell the house. He said if I don't help him, he'll lose everything. What did you tell him? I told him no, that the house stays in the trust, like you intended. Then She paused. He said some things. About you. About how you've poisoned me against him. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Don't be. It helped me see him clearly. Really clearly. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry he got caught. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, listening to the house settle around me. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of renting it out. Gerald had recommended a property management company that would handle everything. The income would go into the trust, help pay for Sophia's education. The house wouldn't be mine anymore, not really, but it would be protected, safe from Brandon's schemes, safe from anyone who might try to take it. My phone buzzed, another voicemail from Brandon. I didn't listen to it. I woke the next morning to find Brandon sitting on my front porch. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same clothes from the day before. His Tesla was parked crookedly in my driveway, one tire up on the curb. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. There's nothing to talk about. Dad, please, just give me 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let him in, made coffee while he sat at the kitchen table, his leg bouncing nervously. I've been thinking, he started, about everything that's happened. And you're right. I made mistakes. Big ones. But I'm still your son. We can fix this. How? You could loan me the money. Just enough to pay off the most urgent debts. I'll pay you back, I promise. We'll set up a payment plan, everything official and legal. No. Dad, I'm facing bankruptcy. Do you understand what that means? I'll lose my job, my car, my credit, everything. You should have thought about that before you took out $200,000 in loans against property you didn't own. His face went red. Why are you being so cruel? This isn't like you. No, Brandon, this is exactly like me. You just never bothered to find out who I really am. You thought I was weak, confused, someone you could manipulate. I set my coffee cup down carefully. You were wrong. I'm your son. Then act like it. He stared at me, and I saw the moment something shifted in his eyes. The pleading stopped. The desperation hardened into something uglier. Fine, he said coldly. If that's how you want to play it, fine. I'm going to court. I'm going to challenge the trust. I'm going to prove you weren't competent when you created it. Good luck with that. I'll win. And when I do, I'll sell this house out from under you so fast, you can't sell what you don't own. Even if you somehow invalidate the trust, which you won't, the house would revert to me, not you. You'd still have nothing. That stopped him. I could see him working through the legal logic, realizing I was right. I hate you, he whispered. No, you don't. You hate that I'm not the person you thought I was. You hate that you can't control me, but you don't hate me. Because if you did, this wouldn't hurt so much. He left without another word. An hour later, I got a call from Gerald. Your son just hired a new attorney, Daniel Price. He's expensive and he's aggressive. This is going to get ugly. How ugly? He's filing an emergency motion to freeze the trust assets and declare you mentally incompetent. He's claiming you're suffering from grief-induced dementia and that the trust was created under undue influence. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Can he win? Not likely. But he can drag this out, make it expensive, make it painful. That's his strategy. Make it hurt enough that you give in just to make it stop. What do we need to do? We fight back. I'll need medical records, psychiatric evaluations, witnesses who can testify to your mental competence. It's going to cost money, Walter. How much? Conservatively, $30,000 to $40,000 to defend against this properly. I thought about my retirement account, my savings, money I'd planned to leave for Sophia's future. Do it, I said, whatever it takes. The next week was a blur of depositions, medical appointments, and legal paperwork. Gerald brought in Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations. She spent 4 hours interviewing me, testing my memory, my reasoning, my decision-making abilities. You're sharper than most 40-year-olds I test, she told me at the end. There's absolutely no evidence of dementia, grief-induced or otherwise. Your son's case is baseless. But that didn't stop Brandon from trying. He filed motion after motion, demanded I undergo more evaluations, subpoenaed my medical records going back 10 years, tried to depose Sophia about my mental state. Gerald blocked most of it, but some things got through, and each one cost money. Meanwhile, the consequences of Brandon's debts were catching up to him. First Capital Lending filed a lawsuit for their $50,000. The credit card companies started garnishing his wages. The Johnsons, despite saying they wouldn't sue, changed their minds and filed a claim for emotional distress. And Kimberly's divorce proceedings turned vicious. I heard about it from Sophia, who'd been following the court filings out of morbid curiosity. She's claiming he defrauded her, Sophia told me over coffee at her apartment. Says he promised her a comfortable life and instead delivered debt and humiliation. She wants the Tesla, the furniture, half his retirement account. There can't be much left in any of those. There isn't. That's why she's so angry. She thought she was marrying someone successful. Turns out she married someone drowning in debt who lied to her about having money. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? I asked. Sophia looked surprised. Are you having second thoughts? I don't know. He's my son. Watching him fall apart like this. Grandpa, he tried to steal your house. He was going to put you in a home against your will. He borrowed money using your property as collateral without your permission. You didn't do this to him. He did it to himself. She was right. I knew she was right. But that didn't make it easier to watch. 2 weeks later, Brandon's attorney withdrew from the case. Turns out Brandon couldn't pay his legal fees. Price wanted $50,000 up front to continue fighting. Brandon didn't have it. Without a lawyer, his challenge to the trust collapsed. The emergency motion was denied. The competency hearing was canceled. He'd lost. I got the notification from Gerald on a Tuesday afternoon. We'd won. The trust was secure. Brandon had no more legal options. "It's over," Gerald said. "You can move forward with renting the house now. The property management company I recommended can start showing it next week." "How's Brandon taking it?" Gerald was quiet for a moment. "Walter, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but he filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy this morning. He's liquidating everything." I sat down heavily. "Everything?" "The Tesla's being repossessed. His retirement accounts will be seized to pay creditors. He's moving into a rental apartment, something cheap on the east side of town, and he's working 2 jobs now, his regular sales position and part-time at a warehouse loading trucks." I thought about my son, who'd driven a Tesla and worn expensive suits, now loading boxes in a warehouse to make ends meet. "There's something else," Gerald continued. "Kimberly's divorce was finalized yesterday. She got the furniture and her personal belongings. He got the debt. All of it. Because most of it was in his name only, she's not liable. So she gets out clean. She's already left Austin. Moved to Dallas, from what I heard. New job, new life, new last name. She's erasing any connection to Brandon completely. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at nothing. I'd won. The house was safe. Sophia's inheritance was protected. Brandon had been stopped. But I didn't feel like a winner. That evening, Sophia came over. She'd brought dinner, Chinese takeout from the place near campus. "You look sad," she observed, setting the containers on the table. "Just thinking." "About Dad?" "About all of it. About what I've done. About what it cost." She sat down across from me. "You protected yourself. That's not wrong." "I know. But watching your own child destroy themselves, even when they brought it on themselves, it's not something I thought I'd ever have to do." We ate in silence for a while. Then Sophia said, "He called me again today." "What did he say?" "That he's sorry. That he understands now what he did wrong. That he wants to make things right." "Do you believe him?" She thought about it. "I think he's sorry things didn't work out the way he planned. I'm not sure he's sorry for the plan itself." That sounded right. "He asked if I'd come visit him," she continued, "at his new apartment. He wants to explain himself." "Are you going to go?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to give him a chance. He's still my father. But another part of me thinks that if I forgive him too easily, he'll never really learn anything." "You're wise beyond your years, you know that?" She smiled sadly. "I learned from the best." Later, after she'd gone home, I stood in my living room looking at the photos on the mantel. Brandon at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning. Brandon at 10 in his Little League uniform. Brandon at 16, awkward and trying to look cool. My son, my boy, the child I'd raised and loved and watched grow into a stranger. I picked up my phone and stared at his number in my contacts. Called him. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Dad?" His voice was cautious, suspicious. "I wanted to tell you something," I said. "What?" "I'm renting out the house. The management company starts showing it next week. The income goes into the trust for Sophia's education." Silence on the other end. "I know you're angry," I continued. "I know you think I'm being cruel. But I need you to understand something. This wasn't about punishing you. This was about protecting myself. About not letting you destroy me just because you're family. You've already said all this. I love you, Brandon. I always have. But love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's greed." More silence. Then quietly, "Do you ever think about forgiving me?" "I think about it every day, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean pretending it never happened. You made choices. Now you live with them. That's how consequences work." "So that's it? We're just done?" I looked around my house at the life I'd built here, the memories embedded in every wall. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday things will be different. But that's up to you. You need to figure out who you want to be, not who you think you should be, or who will get you what you want. who you actually are deep down. I hung up before he could respond. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the property management company, start the process of renting out this house that had been my home for 43 years. But tonight, I just sat in my armchair, in my living room, surrounded by ghosts of better times, and I wondered if winning was supposed to feel this empty. 3 months passed like pages turning in a book I'd already read. I moved in with Sophia. Her apartment near UT campus was small, just a one-bedroom that she insisted I take while she slept on the pull-out couch. I protested, of course, but she had that stubborn streak she'd inherited from her grandmother. "You took care of Grandma for 12 years, she said, unpacking my boxes. "I can sleep on a couch for a few months while we find something bigger." We found a 2-bedroom place within a week. Nothing fancy, but it had a spare room where I could set up my ham radio equipment. Sophia helped me install the antenna on the roof. She was surprisingly good with tools, patient and methodical. "Grandma used to tell me stories about you building things," she said, tightening a bolt. "She said you could fix anything." "Not anything," I said quietly. "Couldn't fix her." Sophia stopped working and looked at me. "You gave her 12 years of dignity and love. That's not nothing, Grandpa." The property management company Gerald recommended started showing the Pinewood house immediately. Within 2 weeks, they'd found renters, a young family with 2 kids. The rental income, $3,200 a month, went straight into the trust. Sophia used some of it for tuition, some for our rent, and saved the rest. She was smart with money, careful and deliberate, nothing like her father. I helped her with her law school assignments. Turned out my decades as a real estate appraiser were actually useful for property law cases. We'd sit at the kitchen table, going through hypotheticals, discussing contract clauses and zoning regulations. "You should have been a lawyer," she told me one night. "Too late now." "You're never too late to use what you know." My radio became a bridge between us. Sophia was curious about the hobby, asked questions about frequencies and propagation. I taught her the basics, showed her how to make contact with operators around the world. "It's like magic," she said the first time she successfully completed a conversation with an operator in New Zealand. "All this distance, and we're just talking." That's exactly what it is. Connection across impossible distances. She studied for her technician class license, passed it on her first try. I was proud in a way I hadn't been proud of anything in years. Meanwhile, Brandon sent letters, long, rambling apologies that arrived every few weeks, like clockwork. I read the first few, then stopped. They all said the same thing. He was sorry. He'd made mistakes. He wanted another chance. But they never said what I needed to hear. They never acknowledged what he'd actually done. Just vague regrets about how things turned out and mistakes on both sides. There were no mistakes on both sides. There was his betrayal and my response. Sophia asked me once if I planned to forgive him. "Forgiveness isn't something you give," I told her. "It's something you earn, and your father hasn't even started trying." I heard through Gerald that Kimberly had moved to Houston, taken a job at a small brokerage under her maiden name. She'd erased Brandon from her life as completely as if he'd never existed. Brandon, meanwhile, was working 2 jobs, his sales position during the day, loading trucks at a warehouse at night. Gerald said he'd moved into a studio apartment in a rough part of town, driving a 10-year-old Honda instead of the Tesla that had been repossessed. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. One evening I was adjusting my radio antenna when Sophia came out to the balcony. "There's a letter from Dad," she said. "This one's different." "Different how?" "He's asking to meet. Just him and me. Says he needs to explain himself." "Are you going to go?" She looked at the letter in her hands. "I don't know. Part of me wants to hear what he has to say, but another part thinks, what's the point? The damage is done. You'll know when you're ready, or if you're ready. There's no rush." She nodded, folding the letter carefully. "Grandpa, do you ever regret it? Any of it?" I thought about that night in the basement, listening to Brandon plan my future without me, about the careful preparation, about watching his plans collapse in real time. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally. "I regret that my son became someone who would try to steal from me. But do I regret protecting myself? No. Even knowing it would hurt him this much, even knowing that, because the alternative was letting him hurt me, and I'm done letting people hurt me just because they're family. She hugged me then, quick and tight. I'm glad you're here. Me too, sweetheart. In early December, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop, Harold, the ham radio operator I'd met months ago. We'd been chatting regularly on the radio, but this was our first time meeting up in person since everything happened. You look different, he observed, stirring his coffee. Lighter, somehow. Living with my granddaughter agrees with me. I heard what happened. With your son. He held up a hand before I could respond. Not prying. Just, well, word gets around in the radio community. Someone mentioned your call sign came up in a property dispute. It's settled now. Good. He grinned. You know what they say about you on the nets? What's that? That Walter Harrison isn't just old. He's dangerous old. I laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in months. Dangerous old. I like that. Patience and knowledge of the law, Harold said, echoing something I'd told him during one of our radio conversations. That's your real weapon. Better than any alternative. We talked for an hour about antennas and atmospheric conditions and the new radio equipment coming out next year. Normal conversation, the kind I'd been missing. When I got home, Sophia was at the kitchen table, buried in textbooks. She looked up when I came in. Good meeting. Very good. Harold's a character. The dangerous old man met another dangerous old man. Where did you hear that? She grinned. I monitor the ham radio frequencies sometimes. Your friends talk about you. Eavesdropping on radio conversations? That's illegal, you know. So is intercepting phone calls, she shot back. But that worked out pretty well for you. Touché. That night, I sat at my radio station, tuning through frequencies. Found an operator in Japan, exchanged signal reports, talked about the weather. Sophia came in halfway through, listened quietly. When I signed off, she said, I'm going to meet with Dad next week. Okay. I don't know what I'm going to say to him. You'll figure it out when you get there. She nodded, then headed to bed. I stayed at the radio, adjusting frequencies, listening to voices in the static. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably lying awake in his studio apartment, working through how to make rent, how to pay his debts, how to put his life back together. I didn't wish him harm, but I didn't wish him help either. He'd made his choices. Now he lived with them, just like I lived with mine. The rental income kept coming. $3,200 a month, steady as clockwork. Sophia's grades stayed strong, all A's, just like her grandmother would have wanted. I helped a young couple down the hall fix their sink, taught a neighbor kid about radio waves, lived a quiet life in a small apartment with my granddaughter. It wasn't the life I'd planned, wasn't the retirement I'd imagined, but it was mine, built on my terms, protected by my decisions, and that was enough. December arrived cold and clear. Sophia met with Brandon. She came home quiet, thoughtful, but didn't volunteer details. I didn't ask. Whatever they'd said to each other was between them. But she didn't meet with him again. We decorated our small apartment for the holidays. Nothing elaborate. A small tree from the grocery store, some lights, a few ornaments Sophia had saved from her childhood. It felt more honest than the big productions we used to have at the Pinewood house. On a quiet evening, we sat by the tree, drinking hot chocolate. The radio hummed softly in the background. I'd made contact with an operator in Tokyo earlier, received a promise of a QSL card for my collection. Grandpa, Sophia said, do you ever regret what you did? Really? I looked at my granddaughter, 19, brilliant, the best thing my family had produced in generations. I regret that my son became the kind of man who would try to steal from his father. But I don't regret protecting myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. She smiled. Dad said you were cruel, that you could have helped him but chose not to. What do you think? I think you taught me something important. That kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. The mail arrived with a holiday card from the property management company. The renters loved the house. They'd asked about a long-term lease. Another envelope contained Sophia's grades. All A's, again. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, I told her. I think she'd be proud of both of us. The radio crackled. Someone calling CQ. I adjusted the frequency, responded. An operator from Australia, cheerful and friendly. We exchanged pleasantries, talked about signal conditions. Normal, easy, good. After I signed off, I sat there for a moment, looking around our small apartment. The radio equipment in the corner, Sophia's law books on the shelf, the trust documents in a file cabinet, protecting what mattered. They'd thought the old man was finished, thought grief and age had made me weak, pliable, easy to manipulate. They were wrong. I didn't lose my house. I protected it. Didn't lose my dignity. I defended it, and I found something better than what they tried to take from me. I found family that showed up, that stayed, that cared. Sophia looked up from her book. What are you thinking about? Just that some battles are worth fighting? Even when they cost you something. Did this one cost you? I thought about Brandon working 2 jobs, alone in a studio apartment, about Kimberly, starting over in Houston, about the life I'd had on Pinewood Drive, now rented to strangers. Yes, I said, but it was worth it. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. The radio hummed. The apartment was warm. My granddaughter was safe and thriving. Justice wasn't always pretty, but it was still justice, and sometimes that was enough. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel and listen to a few stories there. You can find the link to it in the collaboration or description of this video, or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us, because this channel may soon cease to exist.